Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and I am from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos once again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third entry of the Falls of the Castlevania series of Let's Plays, and here we are into Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. So, before we get this game started though, there's actually a plot that we can able to read through. During 15th century Europe, there lived a person named Dracula. He practiced sorcery in order to create a bad world filled with evil. Oh, that sounds a little bit menacing. He began taking over the continent of Europe, changing countries from good to bad. The good people of Europe tried to fight off Dracula, but no one was able to survive. Oh, jeez. Finally, the Belmont family was summoned to battle Dracula's vile forces. The Belmont family has a long history of fighting evil. The townspeople became afraid of the Belmont's superhuman power and asked them to leave the country. Fortunately, the people found a mighty Belmont called Trevor. Alright, so this is basically a prequel to the first game. The curse of Dracula has begun. The fate of Europe lies with Trevor. Okay then, so apparently though, is that according to the forms of the actual text, is that this game takes place, let's just say like a prequel to the first Castlevania game or something like that. Maybe, but then again though, we'll pretty much have to able to save that particular topic once we get the game started. So, as you can tell from the actual capture footage, I'm obviously going to be playing on the Anniversary Collection of Castlevania games, because obviously for the fact no matter what though, because there is no license by Nintendo thingy right there. So, even then though, and also if you couldn't tell, this is the English version, so relatively speaking though, I was originally trying to able to play the Famicom version, because for what I've heard, that the Famicom version is definitely a little bit more superior than the forms of how it does it on the NES version, but then again though, we'll talk more details about that once we get the game started. So here we go, on to Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, and this is potentially the final Castlevania game to be released on the NES, so as a result, yeah, before we move on to the Super Nintendo, well, you guys should probably already know. So, as a result, as you can tell, that the gameplay style, we're going back into the forms of the Castlevania 1 gameplay style, so for what I can guess, not a lot of people do able to appreciate it during the forms of the gameplay changes for the sake of the forms of Castlevania 2 introduce us to. So as a result, they're going back into the forms of the first game, but on steroids. So you know what that means? More stages, more enemies, and more frustration. So as a result, the main protagonist this time around in this game, which appears to be Trevor Belmont, which it plays pretty similar to the forms of how it does it for Simon Belmont ever since it not only in the first game, but also the second game as well, so apparently stiff controls is actually hereditary. So as a result, you're still able to once again utilize the sub-weapons, including the dagger, as well as the forms of the Holy Cross, and eventually Holy Water, and of course the Axe. So even then though, that, well, you might be familiar with the forms of those familiar weapons as far as, you know, sub-weapons as far as this is concerned. So, obviously, much like the forms of how it does on the first game, is that in order able to actually move on to the next level, that you once again have to take on the boss fight at the end of each stage. However, there's actually new additions to this game compared to the forms of how it does it from the first game. So, but then again though, I'll explain more details about that in a moment. So, and in addition to that, I get the strong sense of feeling is that this game is going to be a lot harder than the forms of how it does on the first game, because, well, there might be a couple of times that we might come across into a lot of frustration, as I said before, and also in addition to that, prepare yourselves with quite a few game over screens most of the time. And one thing is worth noting for is that if you haven't played the Famicom version, is that, well, keep this in mind, is that I'm playing the NES version of Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, and the music, it feels a bit more, well, it's actually pretty good to listen to, but I will admit though, for what I've heard that the Famicom version soundtrack, it sounds a lot better. So as a result, that it's a shame about the fact that I was expecting to try to play the Famicom version, but even then though, that'll be a topic for later time, so But anywho though, so yeah, a few things I want to explain for this point today is that today's date, of course, is the 14th of October today, in some cases in 2023 today. Naturally speaking though, we're pretty much almost there to the forms of the halfway point in terms of October already, before we move on to the forms of November. So, geez, it seems to be more specifically that the time flies, you know? Which we've already on about that ever since injuring the forms have been the past few days or something like that. So, yeah, you get the idea for that particular point. So, what I found was a little bit too jealousy for my part is that recently, that certain gamers out there have already experienced Sonic Superstars earlier, which as a result, despite the fact that the UK version has never came out just yet, because it was originally expected to able to be releasing on the 17th of October, as the thing is suggest, but then, for some reason, that everyone else got the game way earlier than it was expecting, so, oh god, those hunchbacks are returning ever since the first game, but even then though, because that's what I mean, is that the difficulty is about to be ramped up to a ridiculous degree. So, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of times about the fact that not only because of the controls is pretty stiff, and also the level design might get infuriating, and not only that, there's gonna be a lot of over-obsessive with the phones. There's one annoying mechanic, where basically though, do you guys even remember those stairs from the likes of the phones within the first game and the second game respectively? Well, there's gonna be a whole bunch of those stairs, and believe me, there's a lot of emphasis on it, so... But even then though, again, we'll talk more about it until for later, so, but even then, so, yeah, here we go, on to the first boss fight on Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, and that is simply this little skeleton knight thingy right there. I'm not exactly sure what his name is though, but relatively speaking though, he's one of the easier fights in the game, especially because if you're much able to keep on upgrading your whip and what have you, and occasionally use the sub-weapon, then you should be able to actually take him on like no sweat. So that's pretty much about it for the first stage in the game. And once again, much like the evolves of how it does in the first Castlevania game, you're able to obtain an orb in order to able to complete the stage. So, and once again, much like the first game, is actually going to be a multitude of like parts or segments throughout the level. Now here's something new, is that you actually give you a choice of which specific level you want to choose. Do you want to go for the up route in order to able to go to the clock tower, or the lower path via the forest? I mean, the choices are yours, and yours alone. So as a result, I'm going to go for the tower level, and as far as for this particular playthrough, as far as I'm concerned, I will able to actually show you guys every single alternative levels that you can simply able to go into. So, but even then though, sometimes the levels like this can be felt a bit frustrating at times, especially noticeable with these godforsaken stairs, which it gets worse though, and during at some points once we get towards the end game, that basically though is about the fact that rather than start the game off like we're able to actually explore in the castle itself, we have to make our way to the castle itself. So even then though that, well, you probably already know what I was going to be expecting to be able to mention about this, so... And of course, much like the first game, there's a whole bunch of candles, which every time you take them down, you can be able to actually reveal some sub-weapons, or, specifically, some hearts. So, however, there are some rare moments that we can able to actually come across into quite a number of, items you can able to actually burst, you know, break certain walls and what have you. Like, for instance, about the fact that much like the forms of how it does on the first game, is that you can still able to obtain the, Pot Burst, which once again allows you to able to restore your health, so even though self-explanatory for that particular stuff worth noting for. And also there are some rare moments that you will able to get 1-ups, so, which I will admit though right away, I've never actually able to actually get myself a 1-up, ever, during the course of the forms of the original Castlevania. Well, that's just mainly because in order to able to get 1-ups in that game is that you have to rely on score system, whilst this game continues that tradition where it comes to obtaining certain scores, that if you reach a certain amount of score points, then obviously you get yourselves a 1-up. But you can now able to actually find, assuming of course if you're lucky enough, then you can now able to actually find the actual rare 1-up pickups, specifically if you try to break certain walls and what have you. So, well, it seems to be more specifically we're going to be exploring the actual specific clock tower and stuff like that, and, well, conveniently enough though, we can able to actually just hop onto those moving gears this time around though, whilst compared to in the first game, that is all pretty much static. Oh, are you kidding me? Oh, that was the first step of the playthrough in the earliest point of the game. Oh jeez, sometimes though, climbing through stairs feels a bit too finicky, but don't worry, once we get to Super Castlevania 4, things gets a little bit more comfortable as far as our journey as far as I'm concerned. Well, at least in a couple of exceptions, but even then no, that's for a topic for specifically for next week, so... Because yeah, despite the fact that usually relatively speaking notice that a lot of people seemed able to obtain, you know, Sonic Superstars way earlier than is originally attempted for its release date in mind. But as a result, despite we've only got about 3 days to go until that game decides to come out on multiple platforms, but conveniently enough though, is that as far as what we mentioned about this before, and despite the fact that I'm actually going to be deciding to take a break on playing Sonic Frontiers for now, because obviously, no matter what though, I'm still pretty much going to be excited for Sonic Superstars once I decide able to play that game on my own time for a bit. It doesn't matter what platforms I'm actually going to be going for, so I believe in that we can pretty much guarantee about the fact that we'll let Luigi decide to take over for a bit for next week, for able to actually tackle for some more parts of Luigi's Mansion and the like. So... anyway, so I think we're now on to the last segment of the films of this particular stage. So, even though much like the films of Fairy does it on not only the first game, but also the second game as well, that this game still utilizes the password feature. So because of that though, originally I was expecting to try to able to type in, there was actually a code named, help me code, which allows you to able to give you 10 lives instead of 3, but I can never seem to able to actually figure this out, although I was expected to able to enter this code, but instead it just takes me into this very specific coding system. So because of that though, I just have no idea why the help me code doesn't work. So even then though, let me know in the comments of how do I supposed to able to figure this out. So but even then though, let's just go ahead and climb through some more staircase and trying to get onto these specific gears, and watch out for those godforsaken Medusa heads, because not only does this side able to give you, of course, more knockback, which is pretty much expected, but also is that sometimes if you manage to able to keep on, you know, getting a lot of progression for the vertical climbing segments, well, basically, you will die if you fell off. So as a result, it feels very similar to the forms of how it does on the Sega Master System version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, that specifically in Jungle Zone Act 2, basically does that if you fall off at one point, once the screen constantly progresses, and then basically the screen just locks itself, basically though you die automatically as well. So anyway, here we go with this next boss fight right here, and he might be pretty easy to take down, but sometimes though you have to be specific with that particular, you know, the AI pattern right there. But once you do enough hits on him though, then obviously stage 2 is pretty much done. Or was it? Well, that's exactly I was expecting to able to mention about this right now, because when you defeat certain bosses, the main gimmick in Castlevania 3 is the partner system, where basically you can able to take one partner with you, and you can able to actually travel to certain stages with your partner. So because of that, each of its own unique abilities, as well as certain disadvantages, and even huge advantages. So because of that, yeah, let's go ahead and take the first partner for now, which appears to be named was Grand Dynasty. I don't know how do I explain this for that particular pronunciation of that specific name in mind, but even then, we got able to leave this particular clock tower, because now we need to go into the actual level in backwards. So it's kind of interesting, all things considered. So even then though, yeah, it looks like we can't go into the castle straight away. So because of that though, because I could assure you the bridge has somehow just got collapsed. So yeah, we can now able to actually just go ahead and travel to the exactly same level again, and as I said, we're about to go backwards now. So because of that though, yeah, I do really like the actual multiple level you know, patterns, or to be more specifically with all these pathways you can able to take. It does have a lot of replay value, which I'm sure you're most able to actually enjoy this kind of sort of thing. But even then though, I will again try my best able to actually decide able to mention about certain levels as much as we can, But obviously, sometimes though, the game can get pretty difficult at times. So, anyways, though, so here we have ourselves Grand Dynasty. And as a result, he's pretty awesome to me, because not only he can able to actually run fast, and also he can able to climb onto ceilings and walls like a spider, but also, get this, he can actually control his jumps in mid-air. So why can't he actually become the only playable character he can able to do this sort of thing, while meanwhile for Trevor Belmont does not have it? The only problem I have with Grant though is his attack range. It's pathetically short. Well, usually if you ever played a Japanese version, his default weapon is actually a throwing dagger, which is much more useful, but is usually weak. So, yeah, as a result, I usually don't mind playing as Grant, assuming of course about the fact that sometimes I will admit though, trying to climb for those specific walls or ceilings can be kind of finicky at times. But anyway, oh, there's that one up, like I mentioned earlier, so that's actually pretty awesome. So, but not only do we get ourselves Grant, but there's also two other playable characters that we will come across into throughout the course of the playthrough. So I will also show you guys every single playable characters of how this game actually has to offer. So as a result, they had a grand total of 4 different playable characters you can able to play around with. So yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. Like, you can play as, you know, Trevor Belmont, which, as a result, you know, again, he plays exactly like Simon Belmont from the likes of in the old games. And also, so far, we've actually played as, well, Grand Dynasty. So because of that, though, and once you're able to get, once you get into the forms of his split paths, you can able to decide to choose whatever levels you want to tackle through. So because of that, it's entirely up to you, but ultimately though it's about the fact that you can able to once again actually traverse into the castle itself once we get to the later portions of the game. So sometimes though it's about the fact that, like I said before, is that the difficulty is about to ramp up to a ridiculous degree. So but even that though, because this game is hard. Like, combined with the forms, the control issues like I mentioned this earlier, and the level design can be infuriating, which as a result, Castlevania 3 is the game that not only requires a lot of patience, but sheer willpower that if you manage able to get too much rage induction, you might able to actually almost throw the controller straight to your TV. Like, relatively speaking though, is that certain levels can be impossible, and it isn't frustrating elements like these awkwardly placed enemies at one point, but eventually for those godforsaken stairs. Like, I'm pretty sure that Tiona has already mentioned about this ever since during the forms of in Castlevania 1 Let's Play, that she absolutely loathes stairs in the old school games. Whilst this game, on the other hand, it will be pretty frustrating, especially towards the end game. So, yeah, wish me luck on this point, because I'm pretty sure, without a doubt, in my mind, that this is by far the hardest Castlevania games that everyone else has been trying to able to be playing through. So, because of the lot of frustrating moments like, of course, knockback, as well as awkwardly placed enemies, and also the level design can be infuriating, especially noticeable if I was trying to show you guys every single level set pieces and what have you. Well, again, wish me luck. So, because I'm seriously gonna need it. And with that, we did somehow escape the actual clock tower, so we can now able to proceed, and as a result, we are now moving on to the 3rd stage. So, and this pretty much takes us to the forest as far as this is concerned. Although, if you're able to actually choose the forest, as soon as you're able to go across into the path splitting segment, obviously it takes you into a different location, or a different spot of the forest, which as a result, it did mention that stage 3-0 or something like that. But once you're able to continue proceedings for stage 3-0, basically it does manage able to take you straight into the forest world itself. So, but even then though, that's actually, you know, a sight to behold, I guess. So, and of course, the checkpoints do act out the same way as the first game, like every time you come across into the next segment of the stage, like if you come across into a door, basically though, the checkpoints will activate if you do manage able to, like, continue your progression. So, yeah, at least it's something worth noting for. But I will admit though right away is that the NES version of this game feels a bit stingy with those checkpoints, so as a result, that there's a lot of times about the fact that you have to get bumped back by few rooms until you're able to actually realize that Also, not to mention though, is that this game is actually a lot longer than the forms of how it does on the first game as well, because of the forms of multiple paths you can able to take, or multiple levels you can able to actually go into. So yeah, it's gonna be quite a lot of busy work around here, especially because, well, if you get to a point about the fact that if you're able to go pretty well for its progression so far, there's a lot of times about the fact that every time you die, you have to get pushed back by a few rooms. So yeah, it feels a bit stingy on those checkpoint departments, but even then though, this will get especially apparent until the final stage. To be more specifically, if you play the NES version of the game, because as a result, unlike the Famicom version, that it does manage to fix that one in particular glaring issue with it. So anyways though, so we can now able to actually proceed to another split path right there. Now I'm actually going to be going into the graveyard segment, so just to ensure that something tells me there's going to be yet another playable character on this particular location. So hopefully though, assuming of course I accidentally died right there, but that's okay, because obviously about the fact no matter what though, we actually got so many lives to accumulate, so of course, no matter what though, it's about the fact that we still able to actually see your health bar, which is pretty self-explanatory, as well as the forms of the enemy health bar, which means that the boss is just on the horizon. So yeah, you probably get the idea. And of course, much like the first game, is that the hearts act out as ammunition every time when you use the sub-weapons. So yeah, it's nothing new or anything else like that. So, but even then though, unlike in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, that hearts can be acted out as like money currency. So, which you probably already know about this ever since in last week. So, oh jeez, those jellyfishes can be annoying to deal with right there, but yeah, sometimes it can be unfair as well about the fact for certain situations that, well, every time when you approach to a staircase, then obviously it's that you're gonna get hit a lot every time when if you walk through upstairs or downstairs. I mean, this is just infuriating at one point. Well, in the beginning it might not be that bad, but until at the very end though, not only does it get infuriating, but also for I've heard that the damage output is a bit too high whenever you do manage to able to get hit by certain enemy encounters towards the end game. I mean, this is just ridiculous. But even then though, again, we'll probably get into more details about that if we get to the evolves towards the end game. Now, I will admit though, once we almost got towards the end game, I'm pretty sure what I'm gonna do is that until tomorrow anyway, I will show you guys the alternative levels that you can able to go into. In addition to that, the fourth and the final playable character once we're able to get to this process. So, anyways though, so if we're able to go in here, there's some more hot roasts, or just potentially pot roasts. So, anyways, here we go with this next fight right there. So, sometimes this guy is pretty easy to deal with, but I will admit though right away, sometimes this guy can be pretty frustrating to deal with, because sometimes he likes to able to run about, and then occasionally at one point that he loves to able to do a charging attack at you. So, but it's just a matter of the forms of the timing aspect you have to deal with right there, and there it goes. And not only we can able to obtain the next orb, as you can tell, but also we can able to come across into the third playable character. Now, out of all the actual playable characters in this game to me though, aside from the forms of Grand to Nasty, we can pretty much guarantee we can able to play as, without a doubt, as one of my favorite playable characters to use in terms of partner system in mind. That's what appears to be buddy forms of Cypher. So as a result, Cypher Monatis, again I do apologize for that particular mispronunciation of this last name, so forgive me if I botched it. So because of that, yeah, the partner system does manage to able to add a lot of replayability to the game. The only problem is though, you can only take one partner at a time. By the time when if you complete certain levels with it, then your character will be your partner will be replaced by the current partner that you've obviously carried along with you. So because of that, seems to be more specifically though, it looks like Grant is not going to be joining with us for the time being. Assuming of course, no matter what though, again, I will show off some alternative pathways we can able to show you for this point. So since we've actually completely done with this particular level for good, so that means we're able to go into a different level theme, which appears to be taking place in a sunken ship. So yeah, that seems pretty interesting. So anyways, let's get to the forms of the next playable character, which is named Cypher. So as a result, Cypher, like Grant, has miserable short range for its physical attacks, but she does offer us plentiful of the forms of those magic abilities. So likely, for instance, is that she does have, well, let's just say 3 magic abilities. And spoiler alert, Cypher, she's a woman. So because of that though, yeah, you probably get the idea of why I was expecting that I say she, because obviously Cypher is a woman. So anyways though, as I said before, that her physical attacks is not the best, but the magic abilities is actually where it comes at. Like, she does have a fireball, which does have its good range, and also she does have the ice abilities, which allows you to able to freeze enemies with ease. And my personal favorite is the forms of the crystal orb, which actually not only designates the forms of certain enemies, but also bosses as well. So whenever I decide able to utilize Cypher, I always have to make sure I need to grind as many of those hearts as much as I can, because that way the magic abilities will become pretty useful for Cypher. So because of that, to me though, that's why I'm potentially trying to able to bring her with me. So just in case, it will make the entire journey a little bit more tolerable, but still, as I said before, that the difficulty is about to ramp up a lot. So but yeah, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Have you guys experienced the Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse? It doesn't matter if it's either on the NES version or the Famicom version. Now, some people seem to say that the Famicom version is more superior than the forms of how it does it on the NES version, because the music in the Famicom version, like I said before, is actually way more better than the forms of how it does it on the NES version. I mean, nothing wrong with the NES version soundtrack to me though, but it's just that I feel like that the Famicom version does manage to able to trump the NES version for one aspect in mind, which is of course the music. So even then though, I was expecting to able to try to originally play the Famicom version like I said before, but since about the fact no matter what though, as I said this before, I play this on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection if you couldn't tell already, which pretty much gives us the well, the way of how the fact that we're only going to be able to see the Japanese text on certain aspects, but also if what I've noticed is that the font on the Japanese version, if you manage to go into the forms of the menu navigation, including the name entry, basically the actual font is very similar to the first Castlevania game, so that's actually quite interesting, all things considered. So, although keep this in mind, this is actually, well, at least if you want to count the forms of the Japanese version of Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest on the Famicom Disk System or something like that, that this is technically the first time ever in overseas that you can able to actually enter your name into your progression to the game or something like that, despite there's still no save system. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. So either way, we did somehow take down Medusa right here. So as a result, like I said before, the fireball attacks is very devastating, especially when you're trying to deal with boss fights. So yeah, I always have to make sure I need to grind as many of those hearts as much as I can, so just in case I can able to actually just to deal with certain bosses with ease. So, well, there are some exceptions here and there. Well, it's just mainly because I'm going to be most likely going to be able to be play as Trevor the whole way through for certain situations, especially considering for the fact that, well, obviously I'm pretty much used to with its stiff momentum for some reason. Ironically, I know, because as a result, because I just want to able to get these things moving. So anyways, if we go in here, we're able to actually find another pot roast. So yeah, Dracula can become quite random at times, even for the sake of the forms of trying to play certain pot roasts in certain walls or what have you. So but even then though, I will admit, the graphics in this game still looks very impressive even to this day, especially concerning this is the final Castlevania game to be released on the NES before we move on to the Super Nintendo. Not only for the Super Nintendo, but same applies with the forms of the Sega Mega Drive / Sega Genesis, including multiple systems as well, ranging from TurboGrafx 16, or specifically PC Engine, and on top of that with the forms of PlayStation 1, and not only that, with the forms of the Game Boy Advance stuff as well, including DS games as well. So because of that, again, we'll talk a bit more about those until we're able to get on to the forms of Super Castlevania 4 and onwards. So, but even then though, that's all I can really say about that. So Anyways though, there's also another thing I should probably talk about this as well, is that, well, happy 5th anniversary of the film's release of Goosebumps 2, Haunted Halloween, I think is what the subtitle for that particular film was called anyway. So yeah, it's been 5 years ago since Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween film did somehow came out, despite the fact that I haven't exactly saw that film on the big screen. Well, that's just because I'm more interested with the films of Incredibles 2, despite the plot feels a bit mixed bag for most fans out there, especially concerning for the fact that the plot twist villain doesn't exactly get high expectations after all. I mean, relatively speaking, that was about the fact that I'm guessing because of how the fact that they just want to go for a different approach for its storytelling and whatever, so... Anyway, so not only we can able to actually deal with one boss, but 2 bosses in this particular segment right there. So not only we did somehow manage able to take down not only 1 mummy, but 2 mummies respectively. So yeah, that's actually pretty interesting, all things considered. So... And also, oh, we have you again. Okay, so that's actually kind of interesting. Sometimes though, is that depending on what levels you go into, sometimes you're able to come across into the exactly same bosses as before at one point sometimes. But it's just about them, no matter what though, they now added in some certain platforms that it might be a little bit tricky to able to get a lot of usage of it. Although, relatively speaking though, it's been about 6 days ago since we've last played something related to Castlevania, so because of that though, yeah, let's just go ahead and kick his butt again. So, except this time is that we're now going to be able to deal with him in a different environment, so... Oh jeez, we have to watch out for able to actually not get smacked by the phones that whatever that object he's going to be using, so... Oh jeez, okay. Alright, so he's almost down. And boom, he's down. He's toasted. And once we're done with that, then this little weird spirit thingy right there just somehow explodes upon itself. And that's it. That's the entire stage. So, I will admit though, I really do enjoy that particular level, I'm not gonna lie, despite how nerve-wracking difficulty that can be. So, once we complete that particular level, it takes us straight into the castle itself, or to be more specifically, the next part of the actual, this entire whole world, or anything else like that. So, yeah, and this is where the difficulty starts to ramp up at this point, folks, because not only we can able to deal with some awkwardly placed enemies, like I said before, but also we now come across into these new types of obstacles here and there, like, for those little platforms with spikes on them. Like, every time whenever you jump into those, sometimes they turn over, as you can see. So it kind of reminds me of something almost entirely related to Yoshi's Island a little bit, except the fact that there was actually a block you can able to actually change those specific directions for either the flat platform or the spike platforms. So, and oh boy, this stage does have filled the brim of stairs, and combine these enemies that are just trying to tick you off, it's so aggravating. Like, incredibly aggravating. Like, I can totally see why that most people did say that Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse is a definition of the hardest games of the entire classic Castlevania games, which, yep, that was along with the forms of not only Battletoads, but also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES, but it's also with the forms of Silver Surfer, and not only that, Super Mario Bros. 2, in some cases Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, and of course Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link for the NES, because it is brutally, notoriously difficult for one of those Zelda games in particular. So, yeah, you probably get the idea of what I was expecting for mentioning about that particular stuff, so... Anyway, so let's go ahead and take down this godforsaken Axe Knights, which I will admit though, that Axe Knights in this game is even twice as bad, because not only they can able to throw axe right at you for a split second, but also, get this, they now have the ability to able to crouch down in order to able to make things a little bit more infuriating to deal with those guys, or those guys in particular, so... But anywho though, so let's go ahead and, are these things kind of reminds me of those, well, let's just say during the forms have been, those hotheads, or just roto-discs for the sake of Zelda, and I don't know about you, because it's been a very long while since I actually have last played certain retro games, because, like I said before, it's about the fact that I've decided to take a break on Sonic Frontiers until that I'll be back into that game at some point in 2 weeks' time, because obviously, no matter what though, oh wait a minute, oh god, I totally forgot about this particular crumbling segment where we have to be fast on this part. So because of that though, if you fell off at all, obviously you will die instantly. So, oh jeez, this gives me a lot of time to actually just try to time myself with the jumps and what have you. And also spirit guards will pop up like nothing else if you keep on moving forward. And then sometimes though you're also able to get surprise attacks by default those gotcha moments for one of those segments in particular, like, you know, with these spirit guards able to pop out of nowhere, assuming of course if you're lucky enough, then you would be able to avoid them with ease. But other times though, sometimes they decide to pop out like nothing else. So anyways, let's go ahead and just take down some more candles just to reveal some more hearts and all that stuff. So yeah, it seems to be more specifically though is that I'm pretty sure we've almost nearly at the end of this particular run through of the game. But like I said before, it's about the fact that I will show you guys every single level themes here and there, just in sake of the forms of some different variety. And not only that though, we can pretty much guarantee for the fact no matter what though, the method I'm going to be using when it comes to show you guys the alternative pathways is that thanks to the forms of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, there's the option called Save Replay, which allows me to save my replay during the course of my certain progression at one point. That will pretty much allows me to save my game or use the save states during the save replay. So because of that, thankfully I don't need to worry about just trying to go back from square one again. So as a result, this is the perfect example of why that I was expecting to try to play it on the Wii Virtual Console re-release version, but you know what I mean, no matter what though, if you manage to play certain games on PAL formats, basically though, they get 50 frames per 50 Hz mode, which means that, you know, everything else feels a lot slower. And not only that though, for certain musical track pieces, for certain NES games, including the Sega Mega Drive games at one point, they obviously felt pretty lacking when it comes to the forms that particular music has been playing. Like, obviously it feels a bit too slow, out of sync in certain scenarios, and yeah, you probably get the idea. So, but even then though, oh my god, not only do we get some even more stairs, but also with the forms of those godforsaken bone pillars that we have to deal with right there. So it's probably best to wait until they start shooting not only one, but two fireballs respectively. So you should be able to be alright and such. But it doesn't really matter though, because you will still get hit by the forms of those godforsaken fireballs from those, you know, bone pillars. I mean, seriously, it's getting ridiculous kind of thing about it though. And trust me what I'm saying is because obviously we were also able to get ourselves not only one, but a plentiful of game overs as well. I mean, seriously, whoever thought that was actually a good idea? Well, thankfully the difficulty has been perfectly well balanced for not only for Super Castlevania 4, but also with the Japanese Famicom version, because as a result, well, I'll explain more details about that once we get towards the end game of this. So I mean, relatively speaking, though, despite the fact that this game is going to be much longer than the first game for sure, so anyways though, so I was really hoping I can able to find a pot roast by now, because obviously I think we're about to come across into, oh goody. So here we go, on to the next fight, which appears to be Frankenstein himself. So obviously we need to able to take him on though, and be careful of these blocks by the way that he decides to toss at you. Not just because of the forms he was trying to toss the block at you, but also you have to watch out for those blocks coming from the ceiling that he activates a little bit of a earthquake right there. So, but even then though, it gets a little bit I will say though is that the boss fights are pretty much the best part of the game, just because no matter what though, not only they are incredibly challenging, but it's also, it does have a lot of variety in them. So because of that, unlike this very pathetic joke boss fights in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, so at the very least we're going back into the forms of somewhat of a challenging fights. So anyway, so now we're done with that, and now we can go on to the bridge segment in well, presumably speaking, that we've almost nearly at the end of the game, basically, for one of those playthroughs in particular, but then again, though, I will you know, show you guys the forms of the alternative pathways or alternative levels after one of these levels coming up, but even then, no. Oh, jeez, those hunchbacks from the very beginning of the stage. And also, it gets really ridiculous until at the very end, like I said before, just because not only for its damage output, but it's also, oh, we actually realized we can be able to come across into water currents. So, I suppose maybe we can probably switch over to Cypher for the best, because obviously we will able to come across into the Ice Spellbook, which, assuming if we're able to actually come across into one, and also for those godforsaken birds, basically if you use Cypher in these segments right there, basically she can able to freeze the water current. So that'll be pretty handy though, especially because, relatively speaking, I was about no matter what though, despite I've only got one, or actually kind of think about it, I've only technically got 2 lives left, so we can pretty much expect for the fact that we still got multiple chances throughout. So, even though thankfully though, until when it gets to the point until Super Castlevania 4, including Castlevania Bloodlines, or A New Generation for those of you who lived in Europe, basically though, you can able to actually have multitude of lives, or to be more specifically, in Castlevania Bloodlines, you can able to actually adjust how many lives you accumulated, likely also 3 or 5, and also there's a difficulty select in Castlevania Bloodlines, whilst this game in particular though does not have a difficulty setting, so it's just all pretty tough and difficult at the same time. And not only that though, I can see why a lot of people prefer playing the Famicom version a lot more, not only because you're able to see those Japanese text, but also is that the actual difficulty is a bit more balanced, so likely also towards the end game. So because of that though, it's all depending on the forms of the damage output, and also there was actually that little thing that I suppose I should probably save that particular topic until for the finale portion of this game. So, oh jeez, okay, there we go. So at the very least, we got an extra life back at the very least. So, although, if we get a game over though, you essentially get bumped back into the beginning of the level you died in. And as I said before, sometimes I will admit though, the checkpoints in this game is pretty stingy sometimes, because when you lose a life, you have to set the bomb 3 rooms back and eventually cause your frustration levels to explode. So, yeah, you probably get the idea of what I was expecting to try to say about it, but again, this will be especially apparent on the final stage, that, well, again, you probably already know what to expect, so, oh jeez, oh, okay, oh jeez, that was a close call, especially I really refuse to die on this point, because, again, you bomb about a few rooms back, and not only that, there's a door up ahead, so we're able to just go in here. And it seems that we're pretty much almost finishing up with the forms of this particular stage. So, it's just no matter what though, we need to be able to avoid, you know, tons of enemies here and there, including crumbling platforms in addition to that as well, and I somehow died. So, oh well, no big deal, because we somehow got the checkpoint there, so no need to worry about the forms of that just yet. Although, if you get a game over though, you have to restart the entire level, so, blah. I mean, relatively speaking of what to expect when it comes to, for that particular matter though, that, well, like the first game, you do have unlimited continues, even though if you get a game over, like I said before, you bump back into the beginning of the level you died at. So, although, unlike in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest though, is that if you get a game over, you can able to continue where you left off, although you lose all of your hearts, mind you, so. But anyways though, so let's go ahead and take on the next fight, and I think it's probably best if we're able to bring out Cypher with us, or I was expecting if I was trying to able to bring Trevor, but either way, here we go with this very weird snake monsters, which it does kind of reminds me it's almost entirely related to Hydra, but it comes close. But even then, this is the reason why I've decided to bring Cypher with us, because if you try to do physical attacks, you should be alright, but no matter what though, you need to be very careful because of knockback, as well as the forms of tiny platforms over that huge body of water. So because of that, once you do enough damage on this weird snake monster, obviously the level is done. So because of that though, yeah, I figure I might as well do one more level for this video, but eventually at some point during in tomorrow's case, like I said before, I will pretty much have to show off every single, like, alternative levels, as you can see. So because of that, Now we're entering the familiar territory, which appears to be we're going on to the Castlevania itself. So because of that, before we get to that though, I think something tells me I don't think it's possible for me to able to actually just to complete this entire stage without any sort of like game over. So eventually the game is going to get tremendously difficult. So ranging from, you know, moving platforms, and of course knockback, and on top of that, certain enemy encounters can be infuriating to deal with, and not only that though, like I said before, a lot of frustration. So, yeah, do you want to know the reason why that this particular portion is like, you know, it's been mentioned on the hardest NES games they've ever played? Well, there's a reason for that. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get rid of these fireballs. At least, thankfully, if you're trying to able to time your whip swings onto that particular fireballs, what those bone pillars are trying to spit at, then you should be alright for the most part. It's just that you have to deal with a lot of emphasis on timing. So, anyways, though, so let's go and use the axe. So just in case we can able to deal with not only a bunch of hunchbacks, but also those birds returned from the likes of in the first game or something. So, oh my god. How can the actual damage output is too high? And especially it gets even worse in Journey at the end game though, because, well, you guys should already know. I will say, the music in the NES version does sound pretty nice, but like I said before, I think to me the Famicom version is definitely a lot more superior when it comes to soundtracks, so... And not only that, with certain gameplay mechanics as well, so they did somehow manage to tweak something, so... Ah, dang it, I messed up my jump. But that's okay, because we got a checkpoint, but I guarantee I'll get a game over at one point, which means that we might come across into the very first game over in terms of the Castlevania Let's Play so far. I mean, nothing too surprising, considering how punishing this game can be. So as a result, similar to Zelda 1, that basically though, I think I'm gonna get a game over like right here. So because of that, there goes my first game over in this entire playthrough. So because of that, I literally tried, but it's just that this game is super punishingly difficult. Especially because, well, you know what I mean, with all these awkward enemy placements, and not only that, potentially speaking though, luckily you do get, as I said before, unlimited amount of continues, so at least that's that, but still, this game is just too punishing. But anyway though, although, unlike in Castlevania Bloodlines for the Sega Genesis or Sega Mega Drive for a new generation, it does have limited amount of continues, so if you use it all up, then it's back to the beginning of the game for you. So because of that, hopefully we'll talk more details about the forms of Castlevania Bloodlines until specifically for the final weekend of October before Halloween is about to be begun. So, anyways though, so let's go and be very careful right here, so just in case... Where's the pot roast? Oh, I somehow got that particular weird collectible right there, which... Still, I will admit though, I really desperately wanted the actual pot roast so badly, because sometimes though, is that this game is going to be pretty punishing, like I said before, especially because not only does it give you a lot of frustrating moments, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, that's essentially what I was going to be expecting to think about when it comes to mention something related to Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, but I mean, relatively speaking though, it's just too much difficulty. I think my only main gripe I have with this game is its difficulty, because it's seriously too much. Although, similar to the forms of how it does it on Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, including Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link, there's a lot of like, moments like, you know, that can give you rage at one point, so... Anyway, we back here, but this time we actually got more lives, and hopefully without any sort of... Oh, goodness gracious. I will admit though, those stone pillars, or these bone pillars, are pretty gonna be annoying in this stage, just because they're in your way. Not only that, every once in a while, they start shooting 3 fireball projectiles, which as a result, it can be pretty nerve-wracking, and not only that, there's some more axe knights to appear, so... Oh, goodness gracious me. But anyway, I suppose the last thing I want to talk about is that, well, conveniently enough, and a perfect timing for this as well, after all, the Switch version is going to be on its way until next year, is that, well, happy 19th anniversary of the game's release of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, originally for the Nintendo GameCube. So yeah, happy 19th birthday for one of the most amazingly acclaimed Paper Mario games of all time, and it's a good thing that the remake is definitely coming on the Switch. So, which, you know, pretty excited about it, especially I get the strong sense of feeling that 2024 is definitely going to be the strongest year after all, not just by the forms of certain upcoming films coming up, but also with certain games and what have you, likely also for its nostalgia factor, and not only that, tons of new things is about to be releasing, even though some of these titles are going to be pretty small, especially concerning for the fact that some people keep on saying that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is the true definition of the one last huge title for Nintendo Switch before they move on to the next system. So, also we got those familiar seesaw platforms ever since in the ship level, so... Alright, so we've almost there, so I'm thinking this might actually be the last segment of this particular stage, so it's just that we need to able to do have some more red skeletons, which can be revived after doing so, and some more birds, and not only that, oh jeez. Yeah, it's even a bummer, there's no invincibility frames, I think so anyway. Well, that's just because about no matter what though, you're about to get hit a lot, so... But that's okay, because we somehow start at the beginning portion of this stage, so that's sure it's something. I will admit though, trying to not get hit by certain enemies is actually not as easy as it looks, just because of all this weird, behaving. Oh jeez, we are able to actually go down this time, so... And also not only that, there's going to be auto-scrolling as well, so because of that, similar to the forms of how it does it on Super Mario Bros. 3, if you don't keep up at all, or if you don't move at all while the actual screen is constantly scrolling, specifically from upwards to likely also we have to go downwards, is that you get crushed and you will die instantly. So yeah, that's a bit weird, don't you think? Although relatively speaking I was about the fact that we did somehow made it towards the end at the very least, which means there's another boss encounter that we can able to deal with. I believe something tells me is that we're about to refight against with the exactly same bosses again, ever since in the forms of the sunken ship level. In addition to that, there's going to be yet another new boss that we will come across into, so... Yeah, and we're able to actually come across into those two yellow mummies once again, so we can pretty much expect that we'll have to play it safe, because I refuse to able to actually die in this fight, just because, again, if I die, that the checkpoint system is pretty stingy, because, you know, that it just feels a bit, you know, nasty whenever you get pushed back for certain segments of the level, so yeah, you probably get the idea. So, but even then, no. Yeah, that's what I can really say about the forms of today's topic at this point, because even then, no, that's as far as I can usually explain about the forms of Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. So, but even then, also I just realized is that if you ever played the Famicom version, it's all in the cartridge this time around, as opposed to the forms of the disc system, unlike the first game and the second game as well. So, and which reminds me is that I have no idea that the Anniversary Collection just never seemed able to get a re-release, or to be more specifically, they never got the forms of the Japanese release of Simon's Quest on the Anniversary Collection or something like that, which I've got no words to think about this, even though that I haven't exactly played that much of Japanese variants for certain games and what have you, aside from a couple. But even then, no, most notably for certain Japanese exclusive titles like Sonic Drift 1, Tails Sky Patrol, and all that stuff. But aside from that, I definitely heard about certain aspects, likely also for regional differences here and there, but that's about it as far as I can usually think about this, so... Anyways though, so let's go and deal with this last hit on this guy, and relatively speaking, that's the third time we're about to take down this guy, so... And if you think we're basically done, well, we've only got one more threat left, and so much to the point we're about to take on this dragon thingy right there. So, yeah, it feels remarkably similar to the forms of how it does it on Dracula's second form, since in the original Castlevania. So, except no matter what though, the biggest difference is this time is that since we now have the partner system, and on top of that, well, assuming of course you need to be super careful with the forms of damage input and all that. So, yeah, I suppose with that being said, I think we should probably end things off this point right here once we defeat this particular fight. So, or this boss, no matter what though. So, yeah, that's pretty much as far as we can think about it. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, is that we're about to show you guys the alternative levels that we can show off. And not only that, we can take on Dracula for good. So, I'll see you guys then.